Alright guys, now we're going to discuss the digestion of the protein and starch in a ham sandwich. Okay, so I've got a little overview here over carbohydrate digestion, protein digestion and fat digestion, but we're not going to discuss the fat just for this question. Yeah, so we're going to stick with the carbohydrates and the proteins. On the left hand side you can see the different places where digestion happens. Yeah, so what we can see here, yeah, I'm sorry that not everything fits on my screen together. Anyway, what we can see here is that in the mouth we have carbohydrate digestion. Yeah, so polysaccharides such as starch or glycogen are digested here, and this is indeed what we find in our sandwich. The bread portion will contain the carbohydrates, and the salivary amylase will digest these to something called a disaccharide called maltose. Yeah. So that is the first step of carbohydrate digestion in our sandwich. And maltose, I can, draw maltose like this. It's a disaccharide. Why di? Because it contains 2 units, and these units are called glucose. Yeah, so maltose consists of 2 glucoses. As we can see, for protein digestion, nothing happens in the mouth. Then we move on to the stomach, and now is where things, so the stomach is here. This is the stomach. I don't think I will draw a very nice stomach, but well, it's okay, you can see it. So basically here's the stomach, and in the stomach is where protein digestion starts. Yeah. So there is an enzyme called pepsin. You can ask yourself, at what pH does pepsin work really well? It should be the pH in the stomach, and the answer is, if you ask yourself, hopefully you found the answer. The answer is that we have a pH of 2, and at this pH pepsin works really well. Now, just in brackets, lots of people think that it's because of, well, basically that the low pH is helping with the digestion. That's not really the case. The low pH is to disinfect the food, yeah, so to kill the microbes and to protect you from food poisoning. What am I doing? Disinfect the food. All right. Okay, but anyway, so digestion of proteins happens in the stomach. Nothing happens to carbohydrates in the stomach. After the stomach comes the small intestine. And in the small intestine, we have a different enzyme called the pancreatic amylase. So in the mouth we have the salivary amylase, and in the small intestine we have the pancreatic amylase. And guess where that comes from? It comes from the pancreas, of course. Yeah. So the pancreatic amylase does basically something very similar to the salivary amylase, which is breaking down starch into maltose, which you know by now is a disaccharide consisting of 2 glucose molecules. Okay, so there we are, we have maltose. Let's see what happens. More maltose, we should say, because we already had maltose in the mouth, but not all starch has been broken down. So additional starch is being broken down in the small intestine. So let's look at what happens to the proteins. Well, proteins are further digested. Yeah, so in the stomach we got polypeptides, and polypeptides are basically pieces of protein. So the protein has already been digested, and these polypeptides, they're broken down further by 2 enzymes that also come from the pancreas called trypsin and chymotrypsin. And then we get, well, smaller polypeptides, which are further broken down by other enzymes called peptidases. At the end of all of this, we have amino acids. Yeah, so you will hopefully remember that these are the building blocks of proteins. So for our carbohydrates, at the moment we have maltose, and for our proteins at the moment we're in the lumen, that is the inner space of the small intestine. For our proteins we have amino acids. Then the last stop is the epithelium of the small intestine, and that, well, the difference is basically that these enzymes here, they're not coming from the pancreas anymore. Yeah, they're secreted by cells that line the small intestine. And they break down these disaccharides into monosaccharides. Now mono, we know, means 1. So I'm starting with a disaccharide here, that is my glucose. my glucose, and that is being broken down into what we call a monosaccharide, just one glucose unit, and this monosaccharide is then absorbed also into the epithelium of the small intestine. And the same happens here as well for the amino acids. They're being absorbed by the epithelium of the small intestine.